Welcome to Breaking the Silence of Design, a bi-monthly vodcast designed to discuss the issues of justice, diversity, equity, and inclusion in the built environment. My name is Karen Compton, principal of A3K Consulting, and your co-host.
And I'm Gabrielle Bullock with Perkins & Will, Director of Global Diversity and Principal, and I am your other co-host. As we move from stories to actions, we begin with the educational pipeline. In 2019, Design Intelligence ranked the University of Southern California's undergraduate architectural program 15th on most admired list for a combination of faculty, programs, culture, and student preparation. Leading the School of Architecture at the time of great social change is Dean Milton S.F Curry. Welcome to the program, Dean Curry.
Thank you.
We have so much to cover in such a short time, so we'll just dive right in. Dean Curry, many schools of design are grappling with the decolonization of the curriculum. What is USC's approach, goals, and timeline for addressing this?
Well, thanks for your question, and it's great to be with you and Karen Compton, and just appreciative for all the work that you're doing and have done for our industry and for our profession and discipline. At USC Architecture, we're educating what we call citizen architects. And what that means is we're attempting to imbue in our students and graduates the ability to think about the agency of the architect much more broadly than traditionally has been the case. And so part of that is examining our curriculum and our pedagogy. I would say that when we think about kind of colonialism and empire, whether it's American empire or European empire, broadly, it's often very difficult to extract the good parts of colonialism and then extricate the bad parts. So there are elements of colonialization and colonialism that unfortunately, we have to live with and reckon with. And I think the goal for us in this current process, that actually began 4 years ago when I started at USC as dean, and coined the term citizen architect. It really began the process of linking with our developing our 5-year plan for diversity, equity, and inclusion to look at our curriculum and adapt to the current conditions that we face, both in academia and in practice. What does that mean? What it means is tasking our program directors of all of our academic programs to look at all the syllabi of all of their courses, to work with faculty, to adjust our collective perceptions of what constitutes the canons of architecture, architectural theory, architectural history, design precedents, and to expand that, to include content, people, practices, geographies that go beyond the European examples and even American examples that we often point to in the history of architecture as really the places to look to for how we develop ideas about architecture today. And so that process has been ongoing. Our students pushed us to accelerate that at the end of last summer. And we've taken that momentum, that additional momentum, and continue to look at all those courses. There are other things that students are doing independent of that in terms of our Society of Women in Architecture, our National Organization of Minority Architecture Students. They're standing up activities and programs that extend the conversations within the classroom to outside of the classroom. The curriculum is not the only place where students have a learning experience at our school. They have it outside the classroom. And in some cases, those conversations can be impactful to what happens in the classroom. I remember when I was a student, I took conversations that began in the classroom, collected with a couple of colleagues out of the classroom, did some more readings, and brought those conversations and ideas back in the classroom to challenge ourselves and our faculty. And that's really the culture that we've been trying to build at USC.
So it sounds to me like the culture you're trying to create is one that fosters these inclusionary conversations so that if students need and want to take conversations outside, there's a structure that allows them to bring them back to the environment and build upon that as part of their educational experience.
Yeah, I think it's part of what we've learned in the COVID environment is there's intense anxiety around what's happening in our culture and society broadly, and then specifically to the American context. Our student body is very diverse and international. That anxiety can be translated into very creative and productive conversations. And I think what we've learned in the pandemic and through the Zoom platform, as we're transacting our curriculum and our pedagogy through this platform, is that our students really want genuine, authentic discussion, not just of a reverberation of readings and trying to kind of absorb knowledge. That's, of course, part of the educational process, but they want discussion. They want a platform to be able to experiment with their own thinking. And I think that's the beauty of academia that we can provide. So I think coming out of this experience, we're going to be looking for more opportunities within each classroom to really carve out the space of discussion and to make sure that on the syllabi, there is dedicated inclusive content that can catalyze that discussion.
Now, part of that catalyst deals with not only the creation of a safe space, but diverse faculty. And I was reviewing many of the strategies that you put in place at USC, and several of those kind of focus around diversity of faculty and diversity of staff. Talk to me a little bit about how tenure plays a part in that, and how does the university try and address the role of tenure as it relates to cultivating, identifying, recruiting, retaining diverse faculty and staff?
Thanks. I had a little bit of a problem here in the last part of your question, but I think what you're getting at is how are we facilitating the creation and sustenance of a diverse faculty and staff.
Yes.
So when I came to USC as dean, we have an interesting constellation of faculty. We have actually several different categories: tenure track, full-time, non-tenure track, and then part-time. And our part-time faculty, some of them have taught with us for 15 years. Some of them have taught with us for one semester and go in and out of their own practices and teaching. And so we have a diverse constellation of faculty. We like that because many of our faculty are practicing professionals, probably a higher percentage of them represented on all categories, in all categories of our faculty than many of our peer institutions. So we like that diversity of practice, peer academics, peer practitioners, et cetera. When it comes to diversity, specifically Black, Latino, Indigenous, and people of color, we've definitely made important strides in that direction. When I came, we hired in the last 2 years 6 new tenure track faculty, 5 of them women, 3 of them women of color, and our very first Black American female faculty member on tenure track at the School of Architecture, as far as I know. That's important because our tenure track faculty and tenured faculty represent about 17% of our overall people who are teaching in the school. And so when we make inroads there, we're making inroads into people who have a lifetime appointment at the school. So that's very important to advance women, to advance people of color, Black, Latinx, and Indigenous faculty there. So that's an important first step. We're going to be making additional steps, both in the tenure track faculty and the full-time, non-tenure track and the part-time. One of the things that I'm very excited about at the part-time level that's a little bit of a hybrid is a new fellowship program. Fellowships are something that is very common in the humanities and sciences postdoctoral, after people have done their PhDs. Not so common in architecture, although there's been an expansion lately. But we're going to have 2-year term fellowships. We're going to call them Citizen Architect Fellows. And they're going to be teaching in our high school program, which we're starting up in the fall of this year, and in our Bachelor of Architecture Professional Degree program. And we're casting the net seeking very diverse applicants, and we're just in the final stages of that process. And I can assure you that we're going to have some exceptional talent joining us, and they will fit right into the school, and also will be representing the diversity that we're looking to build.
You mentioned LAUSD. In 2015, while you were at the University of Michigan, you established the first A-Lab, which is an immersive architectural program for students outside of the borders of the university itself. First of all, what is an A-Lab? And how does this program, this incubator of sorts, improve student outcomes in ways that public school like LAUSD or charter school or even summer camps can't do or does not do?
Thank you. So the program in Michigan that I started and ideated with former Dean Monica Ponce de Leon, who's Dean at Princeton, was very unique, the first of its kind in the country that I know of, because number one, it was 45 minutes away from our campus in the heart of Midtown Detroit. We did work with Detroit Public Schools in that instance. And it was unique because the structure was taking students out of the high school for a complete half day, every day of the week for one entire semester of their junior year, and immersing them in a very creative studio-like environment that we created in a space in Detroit. The reason for doing that is that we had at the University of Michigan several years of experience with after-school programs. And while it feels good that the numbers weren't that large, in other words, the impact wasn't that large, and the translation of students moving through that after-school program, applying and getting into University of Michigan and other schools was not that high. And so there's two things that we wanted to change. One is to have more impact, have a higher throughput of the sheer number of students that would move through a program in any given semester. And number two, have translation as the goal. It feels good to expose students to architecture. It's a part of the toolkit that we need, particularly K through 9. Exposure is very key. But when you get into 10th grade, 11th grade, 12th grade, the key is translation. Students can be as exposed as they want to be, but you've got to get them into these universities, and you've got to have them be successful there and then go into practice or other design fields or academia. That's the metric. And so when I came to USC, in my installation speech, I mentioned that we would create that type of program here in Los Angeles at USC. This is the second largest public school district in the country. We have an enormous amount of responsibility, but also an enormous amount of opportunity in mining the talent in the district to come into our field and our profession, our discipline. So we're starting a program called A-Lab here on our USC campus in the fall. Similar structure, 5 days a week, 3 hours a day, one full semester of the student's junior year. The difference here is that after that program finishes, we will continue to work with the student on every other Saturday or so up until the time that they apply to architecture school. And the requirement of being in the program is that they apply to at least 4 architecture and design schools. That will help us cross the finish line with many of these students to get to that translation point where they're actually applying to schools. They have the capacity coming into our program, and with our mentorship and with their achievement in the program, to actually get into very good architecture schools and succeed.
You know, that really sounds like the big difference between an after-school program or a summer camp. It's that what you call the translation is to follow the student and track them. That seems like it would make the biggest difference, a bigger difference than just a summer camp.
Yeah, but I don't want to dismiss these activities because they're enormously influential to how students begin to think about the possibilities for them, whether it's an after-school program or visiting a fourth grade class. Those are very important. They plant the seed. And I think what I'm saying is as academic institutions at the top tier, with some financial capacity to do our part in making our discipline, our profession more diverse, we have to pick up the ball and deal with that translation portion in the 10th grade through 12th grade period. That's the critical period. But I think what the National Organization of Minority Architects is doing, the AIA, and many others, individual architecture firms at the exposure level, whether it's after school or whether it's summer, those are fantastic. But then in the 10th through 12th grade, we've got to pick up the ball, provide the funding and the capacity to take these students over the finish line into architecture school. And once they get here, we've got to make sure it's accessible and affordable and that they're succeeding. Who wants a student to come into our field, be excited, and then fail? Nobody wants that. And so we've got to create the infrastructures for them to succeed. And I believe that it can be done because I've seen it done. At Michigan, I saw students go through the high school program that we initiated and graduate from University of Michigan Architecture School. Some of them went to Michigan State University in landscape architecture. They're all over. Not all of them went into architecture, but a large number of them did.
Great. And I just want to clarify, I didn't mean instead of the summer camps, because I know my NOMA family is going to be calling me. Yeah. Didn't you explain that very well? Yeah.
Do not send hate mail. Do not send hate mail. That's so not the point. I did have a clarifying question. You made a point of making sure that you work towards having the students academically prepared. What, from your lens, are there other areas of academic preparedness that the students need support on that maybe some of our viewers might be able to kind of step into? I'm just kind of curious about that, because this really is about giving them the best support in order to be successful as professionals. So are there jumping off points or areas where you see?
In Detroit, I met with parents, some of them making $25,000 a year, $50,000 a year, alongside other parents who are making $150,000 a year. But both of their sons and daughters are locked into a public school system that was doing its best to provide the best education that it could, given the financial infrastructure and all the other issues facing Detroit public schools. And so I understand very well what's going on with students and families. In addition, we didn't take any school as a participant unless I walked the halls with the principal and with the person who was going to be the liaison between our university and the school. If I wasn't satisfied with what was going on at the school, we didn't take that school as a partner. And the same applies here in Los Angeles. We're working very closely with LAUSD and its leadership, and also with principals and vice principals and math teachers and art teachers at the schools. Our message to the students and to the schools is, number one, let's demystify architecture. You don't need to have a theoretical PhD in mathematics to be an architect. You need to be confident in all the kind of AP courses and things that any student would want to have going into a top tier architecture school or university. But math is not the end all. We had to demystify that. Number two, architecture is not rocket science. It can be taught if you have the aptitude, the interest. It's not about talent at birth. You have the aptitude and the interest and the work ethic. You can find a place in the design build industry. It may not be as a designer. It may be as a contractor. It may be as an interior designer. It may be as a graphic designer. But there's a place for you. Through our program and through the program that we're building here, students will find out for themselves if the profession, the discipline is for them. And I think that's the key. When I was an undergraduate, I actually went through a high school program at Cornell, and that enabled me to understand, is this something for me? Is it not for me? And I think that's very key also. And I think that in answer to your question, project-based learning is extremely effective. We had students who maybe we're not the greatest math students, but after we applied geometry and started doing analytical drawings of objects in very complex ways, they really got into it. And then you add the cultural component in the program, and they got really excited about what architecture could do, the kind of ideas they could explore through architecture that they had no idea of before the program. So I think that's very exciting.
Wow. I love demystifying the profession and not talent at birth. Is that what you said? I love that. Yeah. So given the magnitude of what you are tackling in your vision at USC, there appears to be a critical role for practice for firms that they can play. What or how do you envision a partnership or the role with practices and firms?
Yeah, that's great. Well, we're lucky to have a great relationship with the profession and with practice. And there is a profession and there is a discipline, and sometimes they don't overlap, and sometimes they do. And so I think what's been very important for USC in particular, as a school that has a very important history and legacy, we are associated with making the translation, in this case, of taking students and making them into people who are ready to practice architecture and to lead. And we've done that through historically many alumni who've gone through the school. But we've also been a school that's been very experimental. When you think about the case study house movement, you think about architects that we've graduated, such as Paul Williams, Frank Gehry, Tom Main, very eclectic practitioners who are not traditional in many ways in terms of either how they practiced or what they produced. And so I think right now, at this particular time, our messaging and pedagogy is really based on being profession focused and socially engaged. And it goes back to, again, the citizen architect. The agency of the architect has to expand. If we sit in traditional practices and see serving the client as the end all of architectural practice, I'm afraid that there's a limit condition to that, and it's limiting to the profession and the discipline. I think in not in opposition to that, but in expansion of that, if we think about practices, traditional and non-traditional, boutique practices, star architects, non-star architects, expanding themselves into collaborations, into collectives where you are taking the agency of the architect and applying it to areas where we are needed: community development, transportation, infrastructure, public art, civic space, protecting our monuments. What kind of monuments should be out there? Protecting our public buildings. What kind of public space should be out there? We can't sit back behind the veil of, we only can do what is comfortable to our clients. We have to expand our agency. And I think that can be done. I think it's being done. And I think that's where intellectually as a school, we can help to rethink practice and to also understand that we have multiple kinds of practices. There's students who graduate who want to start right out of the gate. They may not want to go into traditional practice. 30 to 40% of our students across the country in professional degree programs are not going into traditional practice. That's okay. But we also have to steer students into traditional practices and begin to rethink traditional practices to adapt to the times that we're in. And I think being more porous to community, taking on pro bono projects, collaborating with community groups. I think the work that your firm and you are doing, Gabrielle, with Destination Crenshaw is a really interesting, non-traditional project. And I think those are the kinds of things I think we get excited about here. because we're in such a rich constellation of cultural institutions, many of them related to Black culture, Latinx culture, Indigenous culture, people of color. This is an exciting venue to think about all these issues, and we're a great partner, I think, to do that with. We're lucky and fortunate to have the Architectural Guild, which is a great mentorship and career development and professional networking entity that's connected to our school. It's not only alumni, but it's people in the design build industry, which also expands the notion that our students can be working as lighting consultants, construction, management, all kinds of things that are to be lauded as places where leadership, you can show leadership and also creativity. So I think we're well positioned to work with practice in those various ways.
Great, thank you. So we just have a couple of minutes left. So in our final moments, what thoughts do you want to leave our subscribers and folks that follow you with?
Well, I think we've talked about some of the initiatives that we have that we're very excited about at the school. I think I'd be remiss if I didn't mention one that's close to my heart, which is the acquisition, joint acquisition of the Paul Revere Williams archives with the Getty Research Institute. And the reason that I'm so excited about that initiative is it opens up a whole series of research questions that really expand from academia and traditional history and theory research about an architect and his life to the community in which that architect grew up in, the outsized influence that he had on the urban development and modernization of a city in its infancy, becoming modern, and also the impact that he had and continues to have on the ascension of Black architects and other persons that are underrepresented in our field, and the inspiration that he continues to be many years after his death. So that's very exciting because I think we'll unlock a potential to discuss the history of Los Angeles, the history of Southern California, and also the history of architectural practice. And so that's a very interesting initiative that I'm also very excited about. But in general, I would say our school is well positioned for the moment. I and many people at our school do not come to the issues of diversity, equity, inclusion just from last summer. We've been living this, and our school has been out front on many of these issues for several years, and also the university with the Neighborhood Academic Initiative, et cetera. So we're very excited, and I think having these conversations and expanding our audience is also, we're very thankful for that as well.
Thank you.
Dean Curry, it has been an honor and a privilege to have this conversation with you this morning. Thank you so much for taking the time and taking a virtual seat with us.
Thank you. An honor to speak with you both, and thank you for your leadership as well.
Thank you, Dean Curry.
Thank you. And thank you so much to IBI Group, our founding sponsor, DLR Group for hosting us today, for SOM Architects, as well as Steinberg Hart for joining us in this partnership as we discuss justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion in the built environment.
And I want to thank our followers and our subscribers for joining us and following us, and it's not too late to join the conversation. So you can subscribe to YouTube or follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter, Instagram as well.
Thank you. And thanks again, Dean Curry.